Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, so my number one is Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. I played the PlayStation 3 version, also available on 360 and on PC. So yeah, this is the long-awaited sequel to the original Lords of Shadow, which many people kind of rate as one of the best action adventures of all time. Personally, I don't really get that. I played the first one for review back in the day, and it kind of felt like a kind of God of War light. It was fine, had some good moments, but yeah, the frame rate was kind of all over the place, and the combat was just kind of rote and been done before. So I didn't really get that, but still, yeah, many people are hyped for the sequel. And it starts quite well. You still play as Gabriel Belmont, but he's now Dracula from the events of the first game. So sorry if you haven't played that one, but you can't really escape it if you're going to be talking about this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, the game begins with him in his castle, which is about to be sieged by baddies, basically. As he's now Dracula, he can actually feed on his enemies. That's part of the combat. It's actually basically just a QTE God of War style when you finish someone off, but it's kind of cool how that ties into the character. And the game begins like it's going to be exactly like the first one, sort of hack and slash action combat game, without, not as technical as a Platinum Games game, but it was very much God of War again. Long range combat, say long range, like medium range combat with his whip. Fast combos, dodging. He also has 2 extra weapons, something called the Void Sword, which is a bit slower, and you can regain health by hacking people up with it, and some claws which smash through armor. I mean, all of it's kind of, you've seen it all before, but it's slightly different to the first Lords of Shadow. From there, quickly, like, you have this kind of epic boss battle as you're climbing up the boss. It's kind of cool, I must say. The beginning, it's like one of God of War 3's Titan battles done a little bit on the cheap. It would be unfair of me to say on the cheap, because it's certainly quite lavish. And you think, okay, it's just going to be a slightly slicker version of the first game, all action, and then it all starts to go very wrong indeed. Soon after that, for some reason, the game transports itself into the present day, I'd say, and suddenly your character is partaking in long, tedious and poorly designed stealth sections, which are, I don't know why, for starters, and they're just not fun at all. You're kind of creeping through these, early on anyway, you're creeping through these I call them science corridors, I can't think of anything else. You've seen them in about 10 billion games. A corridor, grey floors, like the stuff that normally happens at the end of a game when they've run out of time. Creeping past these weird, like, Gears of War,
Warhammer.
Warhammer 40k baddies. Yeah. I don't know why, doing crap things like changing into a rat, and the only way to do it, there's like one solution to every stealth puzzle, and you just have to work it out, normally by trial and error. You're just thinking, why am I doing this? This is just rubbish, and they are rubbish. You get through those. There's more hacking and slashing. That's fine. And then it's more stealth, and then it's more hacking and slashing, and long cutscenes acted by brilliant actors, but with a terrible script.
Yeah.
A terrible script. It doesn't mean you can get Paddy Stewart and Hamish Macbeth all day, but it doesn't matter if they're not given anything to work with. And it does sound like they're just on the other end of the phone most of the time. The more you play the game, there's still moments. It has its moments, like amazing Gothic architecture will just kind of appear out of nowhere. The game kind of jumps backwards and forwards in timelines, and it's kind of confused as to exactly where you are. And you have these moments which look amazing, especially for last gen tech as it is. And you're having fun with the combat. The combat's fine. I'd say it's probably for the most part better than the first game, but that it's so quick to throw those moments away that you just end up feeling frustrated and bored, and that's criminal in a game like this. It shouldn't be boring. And the game's massive. It's really fucking long for this genre. You're talking nearly 20 hours of game, and quite frankly, if they'd have the balls to just cut it to 10 hours, which is still a very reasonable length for this type of game, I don't think anybody would have really minded. Got rid of all the stealth and just tightened up the action and just kept it kind of relentless, because like I say, it does have its moments. There's a battle with a boss across a train that like brings in all sorts of different elements, which is pretty cool, and it would have just been a better game for it if they'd managed to do all that stuff. But I think they really tried to overreach, tried to sort of sign off this generation with a true epic, and for me, really kind of they dropped the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't finished it yet, so I can't speak about it like you have. But I didn't. I mean, you said it started quite well. I didn't even think it started well. I just thought the combat was amazingly poor. It's just the level of craftsmanship in the combat is just almost non-existent. It's so simplistic. And the other thing is the enemies don't telegraph their moves, and it means that because it's so visually, it's very drab. When you're in a sort of skirmish with more than sort of a few people, you have to watch them more closely than is frankly comfortable to. And I just ended up blocking and or dodging all of the time. So the combat was incredibly unsatisfying. And that quick time event finisher move that you mentioned, you can use any button to nail it. It's just 2 circles coalesce. You press one button, you can be quite late about it. There's no timing, doesn't matter which button it is. So it's not even really a quick time event. I don't even know what it is. Just press something on your pad now. It's rubbish.
Yeah, it is rubbish. It's rubbish, to be fair.
And it does have an all-star cast, which you do not often see in video games. But that's because all-star casts are very expensive. And yeah, like you said, it's a waste of their talents because it is a gibberish. The story is fucking gibberish. Yeah. But not only that, the fact that they've paid all that money, you play the game thinking, I wish they'd have spent this money somewhere else, because the game feels like it's sort of at a B level. The first Lords of Shadow I liked enough, but it did feel a little bit more lavish than this. This just feels kind of churned out and cheap.
It has its moments, though, to be fair to it. I mean, there's like cheapness sort of was sown throughout the game, undoubtedly. Cheap environments and very slow plodding sections that I don't really understand why they're there. Nobody called for them. They weren't in the first game. But then you'll turn a corner and some lavish Gothic landscape will be there, some amazing castle, or quite an impressive, imposing boss. And you just think, yeah, this is fine. I mean, I didn't have as much of a problem with the combat as you do. I certainly didn't think it was great or even particularly good, but it was fine. It wasn't bothering me. It doesn't bother me too bad. But then again, I didn't really get on with that well with the first game's combat. I just kind of thought they were pretty much on parity with each other. But yeah, overall, just a deeply unsatisfying video game. Deeply unsatisfying. And definitely, you could argue that neither of them are Castlevania games in that traditional mold. They're not at all. They're action games. They don't have that exploration, that backtracking, that structure of finding a new thing. There are elements, there are puzzles in this game, but they're ridiculous. You walk up to them, and before you've even got a chance to realise it's a puzzle, the fucking answer has come up at the bottom of the screen. Yeah. So we're just like, just don't bother then. Just do it for me. Do it in a cutscene if you're going to do that, because I'd rather not have to do the laborious thing of aiming my ice thing at some water or something if you're just going to tell me exactly how to do it. Just kind of deeply unsatisfying is, I think, probably the best thing that I can say about it. That probably is the best thing I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find the combat problematic. I didn't find it difficult or anything like that. I just find it so unsatisfying because you're not really tested on it. You're just kind of looking for these attacks that are very, very badly telegraphed. But yeah, I mean, I haven't finished it, like I said, and I'm no expert on Castlevania, but at this point, as somebody who's played a fair few, I mean, I even like the Nintendo 64 Castlevania games. I think this is the worst one I've played by quite some distance. Harebrained ideas. It's way too many cutscenes. I mean, there are so many cutscenes in the opening few hours. I was just like, putting me to sleep. Yeah,
that first long one is long. When you're talking to he's in it quite a lot, but the guy kind of looks like a plastic Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I mean, that is long. It's like Metal Gear Solid long. But at least those are kind of camp and like amusing in Metal Gear Solid. They're just over. Metal Gear Solid is what it is, but there's just no need for it here. What is this story you're trying to tell? It's a fucking, it's Vampire Diaries. It's not. Well, I guess with the actors involved, I was going to say it's not Shakespeare, but maybe that's what they're shooting for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably. I don't even know if I can be bothered to finish it because I've found it so tedious.
It's long.
And it's tedious. The first 4 or 5 hours or whatever I've done are really tedious. I mean, at this point, I think you'd have to be one hell of an apologist to let this slide because I just think it's really poor.
Yeah, I still think if they could have cut the length in half, but then again, you could do that and maybe the pace would be all messed up, so who knows. But it does feel to me like they've just reached too far. And it's funny because I remember I kept seeing this quote that appeared just before the game came in for review anyway. It was on Eurogamer, and it was something like, the God of War comparisons really piss us off. That's what someone on the development team said about the first game. And it was to do with the preview of this game, and you think, why? That's exactly all you've done is make a God of War clone. That's all the game, all the first game was. It's the same combat, the same dodge mechanic, the same parrying, puzzles, but none of it's as good. It's just talking, I suppose, just marketing, just hype. But when you try and make God of War, gets derided because it's just kind of become a bit of an easy target, and for many people the latest version, Ascension, wasn't all that. Not for me, but God of War is a meticulously well-made game by an unbelievably talented studio, and the subject matter might not appeal to you. It's not the most cerebral of things, but again, I think more unfairly derided than it needs to be. But go and play God of War if you think that anybody can just be God of War, because guess what? There isn't any other games that are as well made as that. There are action combat games that do that specific thing better than God of War. I'm not trying to say that, but in terms of spectacle, in terms of mixing in kind of the big puzzles and the story along with the combat and the brutality, there's a reason that's the most popular series. This isn't anywhere close to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number one is Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. I played the PlayStation 3 version, also available on 360 and on PC. So yeah, this is the long-awaited sequel to the original Lords of Shadow, which many people kind of rate as one of the best actions, basically. As he's now Dracula, he can actually feed on his enemies. That's part of the combat. It's actually basically just a QTE God of War style when you finish someone off, but it's kind of cool how that ties into the character. And the game begins like it's going to be exactly like the first one, sort of hack and adventures of all time. Personally, I don't really get that. I played the first one for review back in the day, and it kind of felt like a kind of God of War light. It was fine, had some good moments, but the frame rate was kind of all over the place, and the combat was just kind of rote and been done before. So I didn't really get that, but still, yeah, many people are hyped for the sequel. And it starts quite well. You still play as Gabriel Belmont, but he's now Dracula from the events of the first game. So sorry if you haven't played that one, but you can't really escape it if you're going to be talking about this one.
Yeah.
And the game begins with him in his castle, which is about to be sieged by /action combat game, not as technical as a Platinum Games game, but it was very much God of War again. Long-range combat, say long-range, like medium-range combat with his whip, fast combos, dodging. He also has 2 extra weapons, something called the Void Sword,